How difficult do you think it was for Ronnie Dio to replace Ozzy as a singer?
I think Ozzy Osbourne and Ronnie James Dio would be the first to admit that Ronnie James Dio is technically a superior singer. I think Ronnie could sing classical music or Pavarotti if he was asked to, whereas Ozzy's a good old heavy metal belter. Ronnie was also a well-established singer in Rainbow, a very popular and successful 70s hard rock heavy metal band. So there's going to be a degree of people who are going to say, sod this, we're not listening, we want Ozzy back. Again, Ozzy had a very successful career throughout the 80s with sets that predominantly featured Sabbath material. So in some respects you're getting two bands. You can watch Ozzy sing Sabbath songs, or you can watch Ronnie James Dio singing Sabbath songs, and the new Sabbath material that was on Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules. I think Sabbath would have split up eventually had they not had a new injection of fresh blood. I think Ronnie James Dio writes music. Well, he was somebody who introduced music, lyrics to the band, rather than just somebody who'd sing and be the front man. And I think he added a more gothic element that was missing before. But the songs he was doing with Rainbow, like Gates of Babylon or Kill the King, aren't that far away from the imagery that Sabbath were singing about.
We had a company called LSD do a stage set. We were going to do a big American tour. We were opening at the Maple Leaf Gardens in Canada. And somebody said, anyone got an idea of what we should do as a stage set? Geezer said, Stonehenge. And the guy said, well, how do you envisage this? And he said, life-size. So they produced a life-size Stonehenge in carbon fibre and whatever. And 3 container loads went out with the rest of the equipment to Canada. And we could get about a quarter of it on stage, and we're sort of edging between these huge monoliths and whatever. Don Arden was the manager at the time. Don Arden, who I have a very soft spot for. And so we get there, and it's unbelievable. There's all this Stonehenge stuff. So we get to the point where normally, and if anyone's seen Spinal Tap, you'll recognise this, normally 3 or 4 roadies used to come on in monk's cowls, and the bells would chime, the dong, dong, and then we go into something like War Pigs or Iron Man or whatever the opening thing was. And on the last, we noticed a dwarf walking around on the day before the opening show, and what's this dwarf? Oh, never mind. So on the final production rehearsal in the afternoon, just doing the bits and pieces, this tape came on of a baby screaming. Now this is the album we did was called Born Again, and the cover was it's a horrible cover. It was a newborn baby painted red with long yellow claws coming out of its fingernails and 2 little horns coming out of its head. And so there's this dwarf comes out, and he's walking across the top of this Stonehenge, and there's this tape screaming, and the dwarf's miming of the screaming, and the tape sort of fades away, and the dwarf falls back from about 35 feet in the air and falls onto this big pile of mattresses, right? And then, dong, the bells start, and the monks come out, and then bong, and the whole thing. It's pure Spinal Tap. So Bev Bevan was playing drums at the time. It was a peculiar year for Sabbath, and we made the best of it. And we're saying to Don, we think this is in the worst possible taste, this dwarf, And Don's going, no, the kids will love it, it'll be great. Okay. So we're watching from the wings, and this dwarf comes out in a red costume with the yellow fingernails, screaming. I'm looking at the kids, they're going, really, just everyone was bursting into laughter, it was absolutely horrendous. So anyway, the dwarf came out and fell off, and the scream sort of tailed away, and the monks came out with their cowls, dong, the bells happened. And you could still hear the screaming in the background. It wasn't the tape, it was the dwarf, because we'd taken all the mattresses away, you see. And that was the end of the dwarf. So then came the real problem, because I couldn't get into my brain any of these lyrics. I couldn't understand them. And so the day before we went away, I said to my wife, I cannot soak in these words. There's no storyline, I can't relate to what they mean. And so I made a cue book. I never used monitors on stage. I've never used monitors. So I made this cue book, and it was one of those display books with plastic pages, and I'd written all the cue lines out, and I practiced in my kitchen before I went away, turning the pages over with my foot. And so I thought, well, that's going to be okay. And I had them put 2 wedges on the front of the stage. They weren't plugged in, but 2 monitor wedges to conceal the book. So after the dwarf had fallen without the mattresses and the monks came on and bang, and then all the dry ice started, bang, we're away. And I walk out, bearing in mind that Ronnie Dio was the previous singer. And it's great. The audience is fantastic, but going berserk and whatever. And I walk out, and they've got the biggest amount of dry ice I've ever seen. They must have had 6 buckets up there. And the dry ice is pumping out, and there's floor spots and everything else. And I suddenly, I'm going around giving it all that, you know, shaking the mic stand around and, yeah. And I suddenly went, oh, shit. The dry ice was sort of waist high, and it's swirling towards the front of the stage. And there's my book. And I couldn't remember the first line of the song. And so I had to fall to my knees, you know, sort of in a dramatic pose, you know, and I'm going, trying to blow the dry ice away. And I'm trying to see what the first line was. And by this time, I'm panicking so much, I don't know what the hell's going on. So I'm going, ah-da-da-da-da. And all you could see was my head popping up above the dry ice and then down again to see the words again, and up again. And I heard somebody in the front shout out, "It's Ronnie Dio!"
Initially, the idea of yet another famous hard rock singer, heavy metal singer, in Ian Gillan joining Black Sabbath, was certainly derided in the press as Deep Sabbath. The actual album itself wasn't actually that bad. It was very heavy. Again, a fresh angle. If anything, they were probably trying to be too heavy, or too heavy metal to make up for what prejudices there'd be. But the album wasn't that bad. Crusher Jewel, or Steve Jewell as he was known then, who designed the sleeve, designed that at the same time as he was designing artwork for Ozzy Osbourne. And the impression I got, he was trying to extricate himself from one camp or the other, and allegedly presented Black Sabbath with a sleeve he knew they'd reject, and as it turned out, they loved it, hence the demonic baby that's on the cover.
What was happening to me was I was so ill because I was still using narcotics and alcohol, and what I was telling the press was a pile of rubbish, actually, because I was saying it was my mum, and it was the band, and it was Ronnie, or it was Tony, or it was something. I was shifting the blame, you know, I was blaming everything basically. But what was really happening was that I couldn't really handle what was going on with me. I had been extremely uncomfortable with how things were in general anyway, but I didn't know that at the time. I know that now, and I know what I was uncomfortable with now, 10 years afterwards or something. But at that particular time, if I recall right, I was in tremendous chaos and tremendous denial of how ill I really was. And he basically, I guess the bottom line was I just got real angry, and that was it. I couldn't do any more. It was resentment that took me off the road. It was booze, narcotics, and resentment that took me off the Heaven and Hell tour, and that's what it was for me. Later on, I found out that it was because I had so many uncomfortable feelings, and I hadn't dealt with those uncomfortable feelings, because I was just, you know, I was like numb. I was not comfortably numb either. I was very uncomfortably numb. And that was what was going on with me. That's why I came off the road. I came off the road and went to bed for 2 years. That's exactly what I did. That's exactly what I did. I left the Heaven and Hell tour, went to bed, made love and got high, and pretended to be in a rock and roll band. And that's it. That's what happened to me.
After the Born Again tour, when Ian Gillan rejoined the reformed Deep Purple, Black Sabbath effectively split up, leaving the remaining members to work on whatever projects they had in mind. Tony Iommi started working on what was a solo album, but the record company in America insisted it was a Black Sabbath album, hence the title Black Sabbath featuring Tony Iommi. The singer he had working on that was Glenn Hughes, and the record is a fine record in itself, but it isn't necessarily a Black Sabbath record. I think the music is very very much aimed at an American radio audience. Hence the song "No Stranger to Love," great rock song in itself, a very American radio-friendly song, but not necessarily a great Black Sabbath song, which I think is where that lineup faltered. Throughout the 80s, Black Sabbath had a succession of different lead singers. I think it's important for a fan base to at least view on the outside the band should have a solid lineup that at least get on as far as they're concerned. After Ian Gillan left to rejoin Deep Purple, he was replaced by Glenn Hughes. Glenn Hughes only lasted a few gigs, was replaced by Ray Gillan. Ray Gillan fulfilled the rest of the touring commitments for the Seventh Star album and began work on the vocals for the Eternal Idol album. Again, he left and was replaced by Tony the Cat Martin. Tony has subsequently become one of the longest serving singers in Black Sabbath, and somebody that the band has returned to for frontman and vocal purposes in between reunions they've had with Ozzy or with Ronnie James Dio or with whoever. In the late 80s, Tony Iommi hooked up with Cozy Powell. Cozy is somebody who's been friends with the band on and off for years. And I think this actually did solidify the lineups from the late 80s and the early 90s. And especially a drummer as respected as Cozy Powell, who's made his name with Jeff Beck, with Rainbow, with Whitesnake, and certainly made his mark on the Black Sabbath albums he played on. I think Cozy shared similar background with Black Sabbath, with Tony Iommi having played similar venues at a similar period in the late 60s and early 70s, and enjoying their biggest successes in the 70s. So I think Cozy was a good drummer, and was right for Black Sabbath at the time.
It'd be good to get back as this band again on the road, because I think it's everybody needs this band out there.
Well, I think the songs that we'll be doing in a live situation will, of course, have to reflect the total history of this band, from its inception with Paranoid, Iron Man, Black Sabbath, NIB, Sweetly Fit. We may not do all of those, but those are songs that are a basic part of the early makeup of the band. And from there, of course, we'll be able to touch upon the couple albums that we had done before together, Heaven and Hell and Mob Rules. Of course, we'll probably do both of those tracks, and a few others, especially from Heaven and Hell, which enjoyed such good success, especially even up to this point. And of course, we have a wealth of material to choose from on this album, which I think we'll probably be looking forward to a lot more. After all, we have battered all those other songs I've mentioned to death for years and years and years. It'll be nice to not only have worked at these songs, but to be able to present them and make them work to the best way. After all, recording is a nice process, and it gets you what it gets you at the end of the day, but if you're a band who has played the way all of us have before, the joy is in going out and making them better on the stage, or just getting the feel and the reaction from it all.
I haven't really got any particular favourite track on a lot of that. It means it's like the one you're on always sounds great at the time, and then like you'll finish that, and then you'll start on another, and you're oh yeah, well, this is good as well. So I think that it's shaped up to be like one of those albums you can't really pick one track. They're all like equally. They've all got their equal points about them.
Then came, of course, the reform. I mean, was that something that you think emerged out of a fan-based desire?
I think after the Ozzy Osbourne lineup, the most remembered or best loved was the Ronnie James Dio lineup. They certainly enjoyed 2 hit albums, and some great songs were written in that period. It's certainly when I got into the band when I was at school, and that was the lineup that was going then. And songs like Neon Nights or Turn Up the Night were in at least the lower reaches of the charts. So I think reforming with Ronnie James Dio and with Vinny Appice was a good move commercially, and it certainly gave the band a bit more credibility to play in the larger venues and be out there performing both tracks from that album, from the Dehumanizer album, but also some of the great songs from Heaven and Hell, like Children of the Sea, Heaven and Hell itself, and tracks like Die Young. When I got into heavy metal and when I got into Black Sabbath, heavy metal music wasn't cool. And it wasn't cool for another 15 years. It's only in the last 5 years where it's okay to like Black Sabbath, where Ozzy Osbourne's become a a media figure. The music, it's people my age who love Black Sabbath as in their teens now are either playing it or can promote it in any way or playlist it. I mean, certainly Black Sabbath don't get played on the radio. They didn't 30 years ago and they don't now. But the albums still sell and continue to sell year after year to a new and younger fan base of kids who weren't born when I got into Black Sabbath.
We're going to put it in the video for the end now, because we're making the end, the whole thing at the end. You're going to love it. The whole thing at the end is like bringing them right up to now.
Great.
You know.